Welcome to the Industry.Inc podcast. I'm Cullen Reichart, your host, and today we'll be covering almost anything related to cannabis.
Cool. Right now.
It's so interesting the way this works, but it's a pretty cool program. All right, so welcome Sarah and Joanna to the Industry.Inc podcast. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Cullen, thanks for having us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. I'm looking through your website and I'm thinking about, what are we going to talk about? And I'm like, we're going to definitely talk about dirt. That's cool. But I think there's something bigger going on with you guys in that area. And it's something that we touch on a lot here because, Humboldt is kind of the birthplace of, it's our birthplace. Not that that's where my company came from, but that's the part of the country that my company was able to that created my company. I mean, without Humboldt, we would not have grown, right? And we're struggling there, obviously, as you guys know, because of the market space and what's happening there. So, before we go into the soil portion of it, I think there's a couple of things that Marco brought up that I thought was interesting as well. But what's going on for your perspective in Humboldt? What are we doing?
There's a lot.
That's a big question.
It
It's
is.
a big question.
It is.
Big
Yeah.
question, and the industry is in a squeeze.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen the industry in a squeeze before, like what, 2016, 2017, there was sort of a bottoming out moment that we all experienced, but then this one actually feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're into the legalization landscape further, and we're seeing sort of the ripple effects of some supply chain issues are really a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
It's
that,
rough out here.
Yeah, the first dip was the initial legalization. We had some challenges, a little dip in the system, and we thought, okay, we're gonna bounce back because this is just what happens when you roll out a new concept, and we're shaky on our feet and stuff. And then with this next one, it was legalization is furthering. We're starting to legalize across the country, globally. Other countries are legalizing as well. And COVID and supply chain issues and inflation. So we're just getting hit from so many different angles that it seems like it's going to be harder to get up.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but more difficult. I think that we don't have as long of a learning curve as we need.
Yeah.
And so, part of what we're doing now is trying to help people shorten their learning curve and get really efficient because, we can't change the market price. On our end of things, we're into the cultivation and producing the product.
Right.
And so I don't have control over the market price, but we do have control over what it costs us to produce that pound. And so what we're trying to do is help people reduce their costs, reduce their inputs, look at what is my labor cost? Can I make my system more efficient? Where is it inefficient? So we started with helping people re-amend their soils, getting the proper amount of fertilizer so you don't over-fertilize and things like that. And people used to throw their soil away every round and buy new soil, and those things are definitely in the past.
Yeah.
But where else can we refine our operations? Where else can we be more efficient to stay in the game? Some people are able to make it at the $300 pound price, and some people definitely can't. But can they? Is the learning curve too steep for some people, or can we get them into a good way?
Right. And I think right now too, it's really about being a really savvy business person and not just being able to, although we have very skilled cultivators, we also need really solid business models and solid operations.
Yeah.
As a business person, Sarah and I, we cut our teeth on a soil laboratory, an analytical laboratory. We had to track the materials and the labor so I could understand what it cost me to run a test on a sample of soil. It was a very complex materials and labor sort of tracking challenge, right? And it's funny because dirty business, the through thread of our business has always been, what do the farmers need? And when we first started our laboratory, we felt like farmers needed to amend their soil, have actual access to scientific information, and then they needed other things, right? So it's always been led by what our farmers need. And what our farmers need now is really good business operations.
Yeah. Well, so I think, listen, this is the crux of the situation. You guys are right on top. You understand what's going on and why we're suffering. And we suffered last year. Last year was a horrible year. I think the whole supply side sector suffered, like the my side, which is harvesting equipment, suffered badly. As a matter of fact, the biggest companies in the sector, the Hawthorns and the GrowGens and these guys, they suffered. Like they were off in the 40s, 40 plus percent in my sector. So I get it. But when you're there, you don't know that that's going to come. And when you're there, that's when you realize like all your inefficiencies are exposed, right?
Yeah.
And that's like this is
Absolutely.
your opportunity. And this is what hurts. And this is what separates, the successful from the unsuccessful, right? It calls out the weak because you have to realize that the money isn't free, right? It's not just like when cannabis was $6,000 a pound, you could do all kinds of
Right.
stuff.
It used to be. That's the thing. It used to be free, basically.
Yeah.
And so, and it was an easy realm to do business in.
Yeah.
And people didn't come to Humboldt County because they wanted to engage in like, the system
Right.
and learning about, cogs and, it's not why they came out here.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that the learning curve is steep because they
Yeah.
weren't coming out here
Correct.
to
Kill it.
run businesses.
We're
and
coming out to make it.
yeah,
Correct.
yeah, they were living an alternative lifestyle,
Yeah.
and then this,
Right.
the man or Babylon, so to speak, has come
Yeah.
and infiltrated their little happy nest, And so what are we going to do about that?
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I mean, I think the efficiencies. I was a corporate guy for a long time. I spent years in SIC at EDS and Hewlett Packard as a Navy contractor with a security clearance and all because I went through the Navy. So I was really hyper exposed to that and hated it. I mean, there was all the stuff that people hate about that kind of culture existed, and I was in it, and I hated it. I mean, I used to have to sit at a desk. I was being paid salary, which means that they're paying me X. They were expecting me to still spend X amount of time. I'm like, I'm getting my work done in like half an hour. Can you just fucking leave me alone? Like, why are you chaining me down to my seat? It just doesn't make any sense. But anyway, the culture thing for which I think is a big part of this conversation, in that the people who left to get to that environment, there was all this money and there's all this freedom. But my point is, when I look back, I go, oh, those companies do this, and this because they have to. Like, they don't survive, without learning efficiencies. Like, and basic efficiencies start with accounting. How much do you spend? How much do you make? And where's the in between? And then when you start to realize that when that starts to get, that margin shrinks, then you have to start figuring out where can I invest my money wisely to increase that margin, right? Because I need that margin to go this way. It keeps going this way. I keep getting closer and closer to starvation. It goes down here, and we know what happens there. And this is what
Yeah,
happens.
below the red line.
People went from like here,
Yeah, real quick, right? And it happened like overnight, and everyone was like, we're in shock.
Yeah.
Right.
But we need to we need to make some decisions, and everyone has their own personal decision to make, whether
Yeah.
they're going to stay in, whether they're going to sell, whether
They're
they're
gonna
going to
fallow.
fallow and then come back. Like, there's a lot of different options for people.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we work with a lot with businesses is process. So like, do you have a good process? A lot of times, like, there's just so much inefficiencies. Like, if we don't know what we're buying ahead of time, let's say we buy in bulk and we have all of our pesticides or fertilizers for the year, versus like, oh, we ran out of this, we have to drive an hour to the store and get the thing and come back, and then, oh, we forgot this other thing, we have to drive to the store. But if you had the process and the inventory and the tracking and all of that,
Yeah.
you would just have everything you need, and you'd walk over to the barn and get it, and you wouldn't be paying for gas and labor to go to town and come back and all that wasted time. And then the day's over and we were going to plant, but now we can't because we spent the day gathering materials. Well, that should have been done
Stacks
days
up on
ago.
top of each other. Every error becomes like an accelerated, and all of a sudden the whole thing's in meltdown. And you're right. And I think for me, to understand exactly what you're talking about, process. So you can't get better at something unless you write down what it is you do. And it's the simplest thing you do. The first, exactly, right? It's write it down. What do? I do this. How do you make your coffee? I wake up, I go to the fucking coffee grinder, I grind my coffee. Well, you can think about that process, but you don't know where the inefficiencies lie unless you write down each step. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I go, okay, well, how can I gain? You know, like for me, I think about this stuff like, what can I gain in time and here and there? Well, I didn't know my coffee maker had a wake up in the morning thing on it, so I don't have to stand and wait for it to warm up anymore. Like, yes, a button, I just set the timer. But I mean, without studying or looking, you know, and it's a silly, funny kind of way of observing, but it's so true in business. If you don't study yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
efficiencies, you can't understand if there's gains to be made. Like, there may not be gains to be had. That can be a reality, right? And then you go, well, this is not profitable, non-sustainable. I'm out, right? But you can't just bail out unless you do a real thorough evaluation. Like, what is
Yeah.
to be gained? How can I do better? And what can I gain out of this? And you know, we could blame a lot of things. The taxation up there is horrible. The rules and regulations are inappropriately designed. They're designed around that $6,000 mark, not around the $300 mark. You know, we could talk about, we blame it on a lot of things, but the reality is, unless you get your house in order and you get yourself straight, you just don't even know if you can survive in the environment that you're in. And we can hope or pray that prices will come back, and or that we salvage something. But this is, you know, it could take more time than you think. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so the best thing to do in those environments is get to work. You know, so explore, self exploration, you know, and I mean by self, I mean business. Dig down inside your business, look at your models, so find out. I mean, people were paying cultivators wonderful amounts of money. That's probably not sustainable anymore, you know. And that's unfortunate, but that's how markets go. And I mean, you know, we can't. You just have to figure these things out. I mean, I think you guys you make all the sense in the world. You're talking the right language. The problem with the language that you're speaking is, it takes somebody that goes, oh yeah, I think that makes sense, right? I have a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful person who is my process manager, and I picked her up out of corporate because corporate understands process. They get it. And to have that
Yeah.
mindset, to bring in that mindset, that continuous evaluation and then movement of, well, this is a more efficient way. So we start to push things in, gain more
Absolutely.
efficiency, right? It's just always about getting better. It's not about perfect, it's about better. But again, if you don't write it down, you can't start from somewhere. So I don't know.
Also, if you don't create that feedback loop for your process as
Correct.
well, like what you were just speaking to is what we call a feedback loop.
Yep.
Is like we have our process and then there's a feedback loop that goes into that constant evaluation because you take your process outcome and it feeds back into it to improve the process itself.
That's right.
You know, it's like if we start tracking our activities in the greenhouses, let's say,
Mhm.
and we take a look at how much it actually costs to spray our plants, we might be thinking about investing in a larger sprayer. Maybe we aren't going to send a fleet of people out with like 3-gallon backpack sprayers into these giant greenhouses we have now. And maybe we're going to get like a larger piece of equipment
Right.
to accommodate our process's efficiency, right? And but you don't know that until you put your process down and you start tracking, you know, what we call activity-based costing. How much does it cost to do X, Y, and Z? You know, and you know, we're data people, we're software people. We had to build a soil testing
I love that you're
laboratory.
telling me this, and I'm looking at your background, and I know where you live, and I go, wow, this is all the bad stuff from corporate America. But it's brilliant. You guys are brilliant in this, and because it's such an essential thing. I mean, we're talking about the basics of survival in a business
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah, absolutely. And as people who have, you know, let's take it back to soil and agriculture, like coming to the cannabis community, being from Humboldt with our background in agriculture, we were also taking, you know, we are also taking pages from conventional agriculture.
Yeah.
As much as I support regenerative agriculture and that's what's in my heart and soul and spirit, I also understand the efficiencies of operations and how conventional ag has tools that we can take
Yeah.
and we can leverage that for our business types and
Yeah.
how we grow cannabis over here. We have a lot that we can cross over from agriculture.
Yeah.
We have a lot that we can cross over from what corporate or sort of your whatever traditional business practices, right?
Right.
Best practices in agriculture, best practices in businesses. There's a lot that we can bring
Yeah.
to our community to become sustainable. That, you know, I mean, one of the ways that corporate places are successful is because they're doing this all the
That's
time.
right.
They're like hyper vigilant about this
Hyper
stuff.
vigilant,
So
and they have teams of people who, are
They do.
dedicated to these kind of things. And for us as smaller companies, not to take those lessons when you can get that lesson on YouTube. You can get that lesson, if you can't stop for a second and see that the value, there is value in that. Because if you take a corporate a chain restaurant, like, we won't name any of them to give them any advertising, but you take any one of them, they're built around such an efficiency model. That's why their food prices are so exceptionally low. Like, you can get 1,800 calories for $8.
Right.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's not that it's good food. That's not the point. But it's so efficient, right? It's so efficient that the value point comes to where you can actually sustain. And that's a hard conversation to have with somebody who looks at those models and sees the negative side of it and can't see the
Absolutely.
valuable side of it. Because I don't care if you're off grid and you're completely disconnected. You can always find efficiency. And you can always rule your kingdom, your life, your business with these same concepts. It's just a matter of habit and learning and maybe getting help. That's a big part of it. We talk to companies all the time. I mean, we make equipment. I make equipment that makes people's jobs more efficient, right? And people go, "Oh, how much does it cost?" And I go, "You're missing the conversation. The conversation is, what do you need? Where can you gain? Will my equipment gain you that efficiency?" Because if the answer to that is yes, then it doesn't matter how much it costs as much as it matters how you cost it, how you budget it. Like you said, like the bigger sprayer, whatever that piece of equipment is, or whatever that efficiency gain is. If you really understand that, you go, "Oh yeah, well, I can get one guy that does all of this with this piece of equipment. I'm going to spend a little bit here. Maybe I can get somebody to help me. Maybe I can share some of that cost with my neighbor. I don't know, but these conversations can become more legitimate, or at least get you in the right direction, so you can look at equipment the right way. One of the biggest sins and problems with cannabis is that they can't really amortize equipment and their investments correctly because it's
I know.
not legal to. And I think I think that, I know as a businessman, because I buy equipment, I protect my income through the purchase of equipment that betters my business. So I can still continue to grow instead of having to get killed on this top line. I can pull into that top line by writing down equipment, and that's not an offer to to your traditional or to a cannabis business at all, because you're not allowed to write off that equipment. And so you're getting killed on the taxes, but you're not also being killed on the idea that you can't even take advantage of the system that exists to protect you from that killing.
Right.
That's part of the problem too. Is like there's you can learn how to do business better, but you're still handicapped by the system that won't allow you to participate in it fully.
Right.
It's like, if you're an agricultural product,
Let
if
us
you're gonna be a
bank.
manufacturer, like, let us do the things that other businesses do. Let me be a business. Let me function my business. But that's killing
Borrow
people.
money, like at a legitimate
Borrow money.
non-usury
Yeah,
rate, like
Right.
farmers
Right.
borrow money
I
all the
think-
time.
Yeah.
They can't
there's
survive without it.
Yeah.
Farm
There's-
loans. It's
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff, again, is like, that's stuff that we can lobby and try to influence policy, and we can move that way together to do that.
Yeah.
But there's, again, this like business management concept is really something that is within their grasp, within their reach, under their control. You can do this.
You can.
And yes, these best practices are kind of a mental barrier for some people, because that's like corporate, or they're kind of have a negative lens. Okay. And there's another barrier there with technology, because getting the right sprayer, that makes sense to a lot of growers, a lot of people in this industry. But using technology to create a database, to increase the business intelligence, to capture some of the R&D of your breeding that you're doing,
Right.
so that you can actually maintain your legacy. Like, whoa, we are now out in outer space, Colin. Let's start doing research databases for breeding on farms, so we can preserve some of this genetic legacy, because we don't know what's out
and
there.
so much of it's lost.
And so much of it is already lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have an amazing, brilliant thing to bring to the world, and
Yeah.
we keep it in our heads, and we share it, amongst ourselves. But
Yeah.
with databases, like one of the main things is that it's a long-term memory system for you. You don't have
Yes.
to remember everything.
Sure.
And with breeding, you're doing so many different things. How could you possibly remember, right? So you need to be able to call something back
Yeah.
up, query the data,
Yeah.
and pull it back up,
Yeah.
and use it to your
Yeah,
advantage.
so
I mean,
writing it
the-
down, keeping it in a database, keeping it accessible of some sort, right? And so that's what what we're doing with equipment is the same thing. We're making equipment that does that. So you don't have to track
Yep.
that information, but you have access to it. If you look
Right.
at metrics, the great evil metric is the most genius thing that cannabis could ever have, and everybody bangs their head against it. But it's a massive database that could have everything that you want in it. Again,
Yeah.
but you run into this kind of concept with people that go, oh man, it's the man controlling it. Okay, but if you're having to use it, then use it to its fullest extent, right?
Absolutely.
Get the information in there. And watering
Yeah,
cycles,
and
feeding cycles. How do you repeat? You got a guy that's your master grower. Okay, what's he do every day? How is he doing it? So you can do it again in case he decides he wants to do something else. You know what? I mean, I don't know. To me,
and
the first time that I lost an employee that had information that I didn't have, that ended.
yeah,
Like, no more.
absolutely.
You got
I
a
know.
system, you got a process.
We're on a destroy the notebook and whiteboard campaign.
Yeah. Whiteboards and notebooks, no good.
No,
We're
but
good.
if you're compiling this data too, the other awesome thing about data is you're going to see patterns and be able to pull patterns out of data
Yeah.
that your brain will never see. And as a breeder, you are looking with everything you have at your plants that you're breeding for certain traits. Why would you not collect the data
Yeah.
to see bigger patterns and really start to understand some of the genetics even on a deeper level, like get that leverage breeders? So anyways, I'm getting a little excited about this. There's so much
It's
urgency to this.
exciting. I mean, it's
You
exciting. Let's be
know?
realistic because, data is everything. Look at Google.
Yes.
Without data, there is no freaking Google. So that's the
Yeah.
biggest company, one of the biggest companies in the world. And what do they do expressly? Data. That's where they make their money. You know.
And they want your data and
Yes.
they don't want you to control your data.
Yeah.
And so that's also problematic, right?
It
So
is.
we're saying to these people, look, if you want your legacy and you want to maintain control of your legacy, you can do so if you go into this realm of data and controlling your data. And we actually work with a whole team of really awesome people that are trying to create using blockchain technology. You should speak to this a little bit, Sarah. Just using IPFS and blockchain technology to help people actually secure and control and keep their own data under control, which I think is going to be really important in the
Yeah.
future. It's
Well, I mean, it's your value.
what we
What's
have
your
to learn
legacy?
how to
What's your
do.
value legacy, right? If you don't have
Right.
that, then your legacy and value drops considerably, right? Because just a business perspective, I walk in and go, I like what you have. I like this piece of equipment. I think I'd like to buy what you have. Show me. And you go, well, it's up here. I
Right,
can't
and
buy
then-
that,
and then-
man.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and then you're just selling assets,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and then you're
But
worthless.
your IP,
Right.
right,
And
your
you're
IP
just selling
is your
assets,
asset
your
too.
equipment.
So yeah, are you just selling pieces of equipment and a
That's
piece of land, or are you selling a functioning turnkey operation with trained up
That's
employees,
correct.
an operations manual? And like you said, when you lose an employee with all that information in their head, you lose part of your business. You
Yeah.
paid for that information, you own it.
There's a
But
really,
you don't
really good.
it's not out there.
You're 100% on. You guys are. I mean, we should be at Harvard Business School talking this. You know what I mean? We could all be in suits and ties.
Well, this is, I was
Really good.
I'm actually really happy we're having this conversation because I think Sarah and I, as I don't know, soil scientists, we talk a lot about soil, we talk a lot about agricultural best practices, but this has been our heart and soul passion for the last couple of years
Good
as
for
we've
you.
watched our community just getting squeezed.
Yeah.
And I mean, the through thread of our company has always been what do farmers need and how can we get people more efficient and how can we use our skill set to help them?
Yeah.
And so now we're here in this data management land and helping people build up strong operations and make their operations efficient because we spent a decade building a soil laboratory where we were literally counting steps for efficiency.
Right.
Yeah.
I want you to take
Yeah.
5 steps, not 20.
That's right.
And going back to
we go
going
one
across.
direction. One.
Yeah,
We have to set it up. Yeah, we have to set it up that way. Otherwise, I
Right.
mean, it's only people are like, well, we're only walking back and forth to the sink across
Like,
the room.
no,
Like,
no.
right, but how many times
Yeah.
and how
Right.
much
Yeah.
loss is there?
I used to have this kid that I just love this kid. He's one of those people, he just worked, he was always busy, man, and I just like, man, that guy's always working. And I sat down and I watched him one day. And I'm watching him and he's over there doing all this busyness, not getting anything done, and he walks all the way
Yes.
across my shop and he grabs a broom and then walks all the way back over to the other side of the shop and sweeps something up, and then walks all the way back over and drops off the broom, and then walks all the way back over. I'm like, oh
Yes.
shit!
Yes.
I'm gonna put a broom over here.
Over there.
Yes.
Just put a room over there.
Yeah.
Little
I spent $5 and I saved him hours.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Those are the things you don't even pay attention to.
It's so interesting, there's so much that I mean, like obviously, there's practitioners of lean and they do the Kaizen and the lean, and I'm a big supporter of all that, and I dig all that stuff. But the one guy that I kind of idolize the most out of what I've seen is that Paul Akers. He does this 2-second lean, which is micro improvements, and it's very approachable. It's very easy because it can be very intimidating to go in and say, oh, I need to lean out my business. No, you got to stop with the I have to do all this at once, because you can't do it. You got to go down in micro step. You got to start to understand how to actually get process written down, and then start how do you approach a process that's ineffective. How do you fix it? And all these things. And he has all that down. And it's really, really simple. And I think it's wonderful stuff. But what you're talking about this guy goes to the extreme. Like, this guy has leaned out his life. Like, he has his diet leaned. He has his workout routine in lean. Like, labels and shit everywhere. You're like, okay, this might be a little bit extreme. But on the other hand, like, you don't have to think about shit, man. He just knows. And he just goes about his life.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's efficient.
Amazing.
Like, if something doesn't work, he's like, I'm gonna fix that. But I get that, and I think that personal journey for me was so valuable because it's actually changed. Like, we changed our efficiencies maybe 30-40% when we moved to Vegas. It just gave us an opportunity to do things the right way from the beginning. And we set up, like, my material comes in one side of my company and it goes out the other side. And it never goes, if it goes backwards, we got a problem. We go fix that.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And those are the kind of things that people, they don't, like you said, like, oh, well, I'm just going right there. Yes. How many times? Right.
Yeah.
What if you had that tool on your belt? What if you had all your tools in a cart?
Yes.
What if you had
Tool belts.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah. I love that you're in a sort of that manufacturing, so you understand how important the process
We live
is,
by it.
and
like
It's directly related to your cost.
we manufacture 8 different pieces of equipment, 8 different things, right? Can you imagine? Hey, where's the part for that? I don't know. What about this? That's 8 different things that are completely created differently. So everything has to go through very, very structured, right? We have carts from the beginning. Everything that goes to this set of machines goes into a cart. It's gone through. We validate everything that goes to step and out, so that every way along the way it gets everything that it needs. So you don't ever have to wonder if something's missing. It's because you lost it. It has nothing to because it's been checked 100 times to get to where you're at, and nobody in my system has to worry about pieces being missing. Nobody has to go backwards. Nobody has to think about stuff. They just do the stuff that they're here to do. Their jobs go easy. Their days go easy. They're not stressed about anything. And you come in and out, And so every section of it is systemized the same way. Even my packaging guy, he knows how he approaches how he's going to package something, right? You just make life easy for people, and then your business runs smooth, and then you know exactly what your costs are. Exactly. You can go down and go, oh, this is where my waste is. How do I reclaim that? Because I need those monies right there. Whatever's in that pile, I got to get that back to me, because this is where I'm dying. I'm underground 3%. Where can I find that?
right.
Find it.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, morale, having like a well-organized process with your workers coming into it, or whatever, like your managed labor. Like, we run into this a lot when we work with teams where the workers are just like fumbling through they're making it work and it's frustrating. And then you give them some tools and they're like, oh my
Wow, what a
God.
magic moment.
And so, yeah, like a well-oiled process, not only makes your business more profitable, more efficient, and all these things, but it actually helps to build morale.
Yes.
Like there are all these other benefits that are like
It,
so amazing to,
it takes so much stress. Like a person who doesn't have, who has a job to do and has to continuously find stuff is stressed, right?
Yeah.
The
Well, they're not
disorganization,
there.
it clouds their
right.
judgment. It makes them inefficient. It makes them
Yeah,
stressed. And if they've got something going on at home, it just gets amplified. And you're like, dude,
right.
you should come to work, and it should be a peaceful environment.
Yeah. We don't want to take up a mental bandwidth with all that
Right,
noise. Like
right.
you can reduce
Why would
that
you?
noise.
Yeah.
Why would you
You
not
know,
reduce the
that's
noise for yourself, for your workers,
yeah,
all of it?
I mean, we encourage, so we encourage people to go and say, hey, I think we could do this better. I see this all the time. This is bothering me, or at least bring up problems, and so we
Yes.
can go and have a Kaizen event or do whatever and try and fix something. But, you know, uh, that's not everybody's capacity, right? So for the people who don't have that capacity, my job is to lean out their process, give them the smoothest path of least resistance in their daily function, so that they don't have to worry. They don't have to worry. They can just come and do, because there's a lot of people who don't think, and they don't. It's just not them. I'm not saying good or bad. It's just some people do. That's what they do. They're laborers, they're workers, they take pride in that aspect. So I don't want to stress them in that respect. I want to get
Right.
them to
And that's what they
flourish.
want to do.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, that's what they
so
want to do.
yeah. Man, I could tell you some stories, some horror stories about bad efficiency. I tell this one a lot, but I got to tell you, this is the worst thing I've ever had. We had this system where we had kind of set things up in little bits and pieces, and we were having one guy build one machine, which is kind of like the ultimate lean process, right? Oh, you sit in your cubicle, and we had it all worked out. And I walk out, and this guy has a motor and has a plug on it, and he cuts the plug off and he sticks it through a hole in the machine. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, well, that's what we always do. In the other room, I have a guy who's putting the plugs on the motors, right? So I'm putting plugs on over here. He's cutting plugs off over here, put it through a hole that's not the right size. I'm like, how long have you been doing that? And he goes, I've always done it this way. Well, who taught you? That guy. I'm like, well, okay,
Oh,
dude, where did you
oh,
learn this? Well, that's what we always learn. It's what we've always done. I'm like, how on earth? Like literally, I'm like, oh, time out. We don't do this anymore. I go over to the engineer. I'm like, can you make this hole, a half an inch bigger? Oh yeah, no problem. Click, 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 done. Well, you
Wow.
can stick
right.
the freaking cord through the hole, but the
Well,
communication
chop it off.
stops, and you've got guys who are passing on bad information,
Yeah.
and I think about that all the time. Like, here we are with a system I thought I was so in tune to, and we're doing one job, undoing that job, and redoing that job.
Yeah.
I mean, we should not have
But
done
that's
the
why
job in the first place. Anyway,
But that's why you have to audit your processes. You set a process, you have standard operating procedures. You're not always going to look at them. You're going to forget. You're not going to look at
yep,
the binder, whatever. So you have to audit yourself and say, are
correct.
we still doing it according to our SOPs? And if we need to change the SOP, we have a management of change and everyone is on board. Otherwise, people are like, oh, well, you do it that way, but I find it easier to do it this way. And then everyone's doing things different ways. And that has its own inefficiencies.
Right. So
I
the
mean,
other
I listen. I love this
no
because
training.
this is the reality of things, and so many people can't have this conversation, right? They just can't have this conversation, and I'm enjoying every moment of it because I live it. Like, this is what
Right.
this
You
is what makes
understand.
us survive, and
Right.
especially in the times that are tough, man. The tough times, this is what gives you the opportunity to get out
It's
of
so
it,
much more important now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So
Well, we have a lot of we luckily we have support in our community.
that's good.
Even during the squeeze time, we have people we're working with to develop these systems because they absolutely understand how urgent it is
Yeah,
to get on top of what they're doing.
And they're going to be the ones that are
Yeah.
successful. They will survive
that's
this,
correct.
and they will, so there are definitely some businesses that are thriving. Maybe they're not thriving right now, but they see the long vision and they know what they need to do to
They're
thrive.
prepared to survive. Yeah, you can hunker down and get through it, and that's all you can ask for. Because there's no way to determine what the future is. We just live through it as we go, and if you're not bolstering up your presence, and working on yourself, then there's no way you can be prepared for tomorrow, right? So I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, I grew up in inefficiency. My dad ran a horrible business. He was just, wasn't, he just didn't have the mind for it. Like he didn't understand how, it was just like, oh, I need a good guy. And I saw so many good guys come and go out of the shop, and then everything would fall off again. And you have to, oh, I gotta get
Yeah.
another good guy. I'm like, what? You're killing me with
Yeah.
this good guy thing.
They can be good guys at what they do, but if you can't manage them and give them the tools and give them the consistency and give them the team and have the
Yep.
good morale and teamwork, like they're not going to do a good job. I see so many businesses pull in really awesome, smart people,
And then
but they
run
can't
them.
facilitate.
And they burn them out.
Yeah,
You
and
burn them
then they
out.
get
You take a
and they
rock
get
star, and you work him
yeah,
to death because he's good at it. And you're like, oh, what's wrong, man? Why are you
yeah.
leaving me? It's like, because I can do, this is easier. I don't need this anymore.
Yeah, I am a rock star, and I'd like to also do it with peace and joy in my
Yeah,
heart. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
so
I don't need to be stressed all the
we're
time.
humans too.
Amazing. Listen, that's amazing. I mean, I wasn't expect. I mean, I'm really happy that we're having this conversation because I think this is the key to all of it. And again, we don't know what market's going to bring, and we don't know how it's going to roll out in that area. But the only way you will survive is if you do these things. That's a guarantee. I mean, somebody might get lucky and get through the cracks, but in general, you don't get efficient, you don't get lean, you don't clean up your business, you're not going to make it because the money
Right.
isn't there to cover your problems. And that
Right.
is, I mean, had the same problem. I've been through this. When the money is good, it hides everything that's bad,
Right.
because it
True.
doesn't matter. It's like you're leaking and you're bleeding out, but you got plenty of blood. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. Many more coming in.
Yeah, but when that goes away, yeah, kind of different. So this is a challenge then. I mean, you guys has to be a challenge.
It is. There's most of it so we've been dealing with a lot of the technical. We have a very technical science-based mind, and that's great. But getting over the psychological hurdle of people is a whole different world, right? And so
Yeah.
I can build a database and I can hand it
Or-
over to you, but are you
or-
going to run it? Are you going to facilitate it?
Right.
Are you going to get over your technology phobia? Are you going to engage, right? So then when I demo our software to people, they're like, "That's amazing, that's brilliant." I'm like, "But you have to engage. I can't just make it magically go for you, right? I can to some degree, but I have to then hand it off." Or, there's also the scarcity thing. Like I can't afford anything. But a business is about investments and return on your investment. So I think sometimes people are looking at it incorrectly, like you're saying with your machinery. It's like it costs money, but how much are you saving on labor? And products and everything. And so if the scarcity that everyone's feeling is inhibiting them from making good business decisions, making good investments that will help them. So you still
Right.
have to spend money to make money,
Yes.
but you just can't spend it willy-nilly. You need to make informed
You just have
decisions.
to be more calculated. But how do you calculate? How do you make that calculation unless you have the information that you're talking about? And how do you,
Right.
and you've done the study to understand what, because again, a piece of equipment in my mind is, we always have the price conversation. That's always there, but I never
Yeah.
have that price conversation till the end, right?
Yeah.
Because I know I've been convinced, or I've talked myself into this piece of equipment. Now I'm going to talk about price. I don't go at the price first, because it doesn't matter what it costs. If it doesn't do what I need, it could be free. Like, why would I put it in my facility
Yeah,
if it's free and it
absolutely.
hurts me? So
And if it's going to 10x, 50x, 100x your company, look at those numbers side by side.
Right.
And then your piece of equipment looks really cheap all of a sudden.
yeah, just the price just disappears. So you have to. It's such an interesting conversation, and it's really foreign to cannabis, even in big cannabis, because we're literally multinational. We've been all over the world. We're all in the biggest greenhouse grows in the world. We're in the biggest indoor out in the world. We're on small farms all over the place. So we're everywhere. We've seen them all, but even at the best, the top of the top, where they've got tens of millions of dollars invested, and they're spending, they still don't understand the equation to evaluate equipment, or not just mostly it's equipment, because they don't get what equipment does. They go, oh well,
Right.
I'm not going to spend that kind of money. Whoa, time out. Let's talk about earnings. Let's talk about value. Let's talk
Yeah.
about what.
Are you not going to save that much money
Yeah.
either? If you're not going
Yeah.
to spend that much money, you're definitely not going to save that much money too. You're
That's
you're
right.
missing the other half of the conversation.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And
It's
with
really,
technology too, it's like getting the right piece of equipment. Let's talk about technology helping businesses run more efficient. You know,
Yeah.
these database systems that are out there, these ERPs and all
Yeah.
these things are being
Seed to
made
sale
for
software.
right, all these things being
I
made
got all
for
that crap.
cannabis. You know, like yep.
You
And
have
we've
to.
gone down the rabbit hole, and I'm telling you, it is very difficult. I am hard pressed to find one of these software systems that does activity based accounting and helps you to actually tease out your direct materials, your direct labor, and your overhead.
Yeah.
Like you might be able, you might be able to get that in a big lump, but if you don't take into account all the cogs of labor and materials in your cultivation to produce the flowers, you're not going to know your price per unit, period.
Yeah.
And we are very hard pressed right now to find any sort of software system out there that's cost effective
Yeah.
for people to get. They're very expensive. These ERPs
my
run
God.
you,
Yeah.
1,500 to $4,000 a month.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not sustainable for a micro business
Yeah.
or a small producer here in California, right? So
No,
like,
it's
what are
not.
we doing?
And
So we've
actually,
got
and,
to be
and they're not
smart about
robust
it.
enough. They're not.
Right.
Would be right because they're not addressing what your needs are. Like for me, I
Right.
have inventory management, so that's just fucking data points. And then I have I have stations, so I understand my cost of machines, understand the hourly rate of machines, but I have no way of putting in the information around employees, employee movement, and what they do. And for me, it's not nearly as big of a deal because it's an hourly rate and it goes into the machine calculation, right? This guy cost
Right.
me this, that cost me this. Together they equal this. So every time I run this machine, it costs me
Simple
X
equation.
amount
Pretty
of dollars,
simple.
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are talking about something different altogether because they don't tie together.
Yeah, and it's very complex, and how people run their operations is very customized.
Yeah.
And so, how you decide to go about and gather that sort of data to sort of get those optics into your company, to get that transparency into your costs, is a unique solution for every single person. And I find a lot of these very expensive ERPs and database software systems that you can buy, they'll give you that really high monthly licensing fee, and then you have to have a whole person in your company to understand that database and customize it around your process. And I think that's also a huge daunting task for a lot of people. They're like, I don't know how to customize a software system to my business. Like, how do you do that? And we are so plugged into how cannabis is grown and processed and manufactured and all the different facets of the industry that we can go in with our software and say, hey, we can wrap this around your processes. We understand cannabis because we've been in every part of this industry for years. And we understand how to translate your operations into a customized database solution. Let's do this.
Right.
And while we're in your operations, let's get you the right sprayer. Let's get you the integrated pest program you really need. Let's get you the viroid testing protocols that you need, the virus and pathology. Let's get your quarantine practices fixed.
Right.
Let's get your nutrient management under control.
So it's a holistic approach,
right?
Know? And one of the problems with these seed to sale softwares, they say seed to sale, but they start at the harvest batch.
They start at when
They forgot the other part.
But that's all Metric requires. And the thing is,
Right.
when I talk about data collection with farmers, and they're like, yeah, well, Metric doesn't require me to do that. I'm like, but don't you require you to do that? Don't you want to know about your business? It's your data. Somebody else, people take your data all the time. Like, leverage your own data for you to make money off of you.
Yeah.
And, starting at harvest batch, because that's all that's required, like that, we're losing a lot on that end
we're
too.
losing a lot.
Yeah.
And so I see that a lot. Is like, we're working on the cultivation, the nurseries, the genetics, the breeding, and like no one's really doing that. And they say that they are, and then we get in there, and her and I do demos of these softwares. Like, cool, show me the cultivation nursery. Like, yeah, well, it's kind of a skeleton, and we're kind of working on it, but there's not a lot of money. The cultivators can't really afford it, so we're not really catering it to them, right?
Or like, here's a
So
digital
how could
notebook.
they?
Here's a digital notebook to put your recipes in. I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's the same thing. We need to query. We need to be able to
We need
ask the data
queryable,
questions and have
you
them give
know,
us the answers.
I
You know,
don't
this is
need-
AI that we're talking about.
right.
Again, so what's interesting, and I think this is what happens is, and on all these things that happen, big companies get bigger and they get more wealthy. Why? Because they can afford all these things, right? They can qualify, quantify, and validate, right? We have to do it in
Yes.
everything that we do. I can't imagine. I've been forced to. I can't imagine having the first third of my business. What's going on over there? I can't figure that out.
Yeah.
Like what?
Correct.
It blew
Yeah,
my
right.
mind.
Yeah. And the cool thing about the cool thing about what we're doing too is like we don't own the software. We go through a company called Smart Sheets. I'll just give.
Oh yeah, Smart
them
Sheets is wonderful. We use it all the time.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Plug,
Great.
plug.
Yeah, plug. We love them, but we didn't develop it. And when
Secrets of success, people.
Yes.
And we just use cloud-based platforms, but we tell the client, go ahead and sign up for that license. It's $900 a year.
Yeah.
For like 3 licensed seats, you know?
And
Wonderful.
that's all the license fee costs, and then you pay me to customize it, train your people, and hand it off. Then I'm gone.
Yeah.
So now your annual fee is $900 a year, plus the person that you pay to run your system, right? And there's like a one upfront cost for me, but a lot of these softwares they just keep going and going, annual fees. Now you're stuck in their software and you can't leave.
and their
You can pay that
databases are
software for how many
jacked,
years?
or they're like I bought an
Right.
ERP a
That
couple
doesn't
years
fit your
ago,
model.
and they're like, I'm like, okay, so what happens if I do this? And I'm like, oh, well, it doesn't really allow for that. Like, whoa,
Right.
time out. We do this all the time. Like,
Yeah.
that's something we should have talked about before. Oh no, it's very rigid. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem with those
That's
things.
what we don't like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just
That's
doesn't
what we don't
work
like
because
about it.
we're not McDonald's. We don't need the same
Right.
shit they got, right? So
Right, and we want to take the good parts again with the corporate and the big ag. We want to take the good parts and leave the rest, and then
Yeah.
maneuver them for our
Yeah.
for
Our
our
culture,
situation.
yeah.
And so that's the whole like wrapping it around of your process. We're not just selling you a module
Yeah.
that is rigid and then doesn't fit for you, and for a whole bunch of money. It's like this is very versatile. Whatever you want, we can build it. If you can think of it, we can build it because Smart Sheets is just really cool like that.
It's super
And it
super
doesn't
simple to
involve-
get to put it together, and we use it. We use it all the time because that when you start doing it and you start getting, we use it a lot for communication, right? So it's
Oh,
how we
yeah, great
track
for that.
stuff from X to Y, right? You're like, oh, okay, well, this guy now knows that he's got these priorities and this is what, and now he knows this is coming in. And it's just like a little job tracker in some respects, but it's also keeping accountability for us in different areas. But we use it because it can be changed. I can do what I need to with it, and I can say, well, this didn't work so well. What are
Yeah.
we missing? Well, I don't know what we're missing, but we did miss this deliverable and this deliverable. Well, let's look at that whole process. Well, we missed that because we didn't have a way to flag this. Like,
Exactly.
how can we prioritize? Oh, well, we just need to
Exactly.
do that. Let's
Yep.
okay, let's prioritize this. Again, management of process in a real-time kind of environment, in a rapid turnaround. I mean, it's not that rapid. I mean, it takes months sometimes to fix this shit, but it's fixable.
Yeah, it's fixed. You can go back and look at the information. You can go back and look at the cool thing about Smart Sheets, it has that, the centralized communication. So you can go back
Yeah.
a year from now, and you can look at what comments, what were we talking about? What did you say? What did I say?
Yeah.
We look at the attachment that we uploaded. And
That's
so again, with
great.
that long-term memory, and then you can use that information to make
Yeah.
your business more efficient, find those mistakes, find the feedback loop, and add an automation, add a notification. What do you need?
Yeah,
And you can build it.
that's wonderful. That's a great tool. Good for you guys. That's awesome. So
Yeah, and-
you are basically taking the skeleton, which is the Smart Sheet skeleton, and you're customizing it because you understand what the cannabis business is so well that you can then look at somebody's business and you can customize all their data points that they need, help them to understand those, or take what they
Yes.
want to have if they have some most of them don't. But
Which
you know,
most tech companies,
Yeah.
when they're doing their customer success and their build out and their implementation and all the things, they don't know about cannabis, and so
No,
they're
not a
asking
clue.
you a lot more questions than I have to ask you to get to the point.
Yeah.
I'm just ready to go. I'm ready to build for you. I already know what you need.
Yeah.
The tech person is going to need a lot of background information about your whole industry, about your whole business before they can even
Right.
get started.
Like-
So that's another benefit.
even in manufacturing, which is manufacturing is this. It's not like we don't fit into anybody else's basket. And when I look at ERP for manufacturing, it's missing. You know, and that's where we get stuck. I don't want a customized only piece of software, right? Because I don't want something that somebody can't come in and figure out what's going on or make changes to later, right? I don't want to be stuck to just this software developer guy who made me the fucking coolest software ever, right? So to me, Smartsheets works well because I can go, it's going to be around, and the developers are around, and people are, you know, I can get somebody in, a young computer guy goes, oh, this is nothing, man, and off they go.
It's Excel based. Like we already understand
Yeah.
Excel. We already use Google Sheets. We already use Facebook and the comment features. We already know how to upload a document. Like all that is right there. It's like
Yeah.
it's an interface that we're already familiar with. Web
Right,
forms.
web forms,
Like,
yeah,
it's
everybody
already
knows.
anyone can sit down and just start using it without having to learn a whole new language.
That's great. That's great. And
Yeah.
it's preserving, and again, to the data, the preserving of the information and the legacy, the IP, if you will, which is what we're talking about, which I have a whole different view on now. Because I think with the modern world, IP should be defined a little bit differently than through the patent office, but that's okay, whatever. You know, with the instant like access, as soon as like if I make something and I put it online, I should be patented right there, then and there. You rip that off, I owned it, I came out first. But we'll talk about that some other time.
Well, that is actually a cool segue. There's a couple different organizations. She was alluding to it earlier. There's a Canopy Right. I don't know if you've heard of Canopy Right, but
Yeah.
they're helping breeders copyright their strains.
Yeah.
And then LeafWorks DNA, they're helping people to like they do an herbarium press and then they do a description. And so with this herbarium press description and plus the copyright plus the genetic profiling. Now there's a next step of putting it onto the blockchain to authenticate it, right? So once it's on the blockchain and it has, you know, a timestamp and a wallet code and all of that, now you own that IP. You have it copyrighted, it's on the blockchain, you did it first, you have all this proof that it's yours. Now somebody can lease that from you. It's like, you want to know how to grow this genetic in this way with my feeding program, with my regional specificity, all of that. You can pay for that now and you can license it for a year for this much money, or you can, you know, buy it from me or whatever. So you can leverage your IP now. Because if your IP is all in your head or on pieces of paper or in your employees' heads or it's all over the place in emails, text threads, it's like,
you know how many things I've forgotten over my life? I wish I could remember.
Yeah, it's important.
Leaked out of my ears.
Yeah, and it's important to work with these teams of people that can, you know, genotype and phenotype a strain, and then we're working with people who can get us that stamped into blockchain land, and then, you know, all the
and
data.
now marketplace, right? Now we're in the metaverse. Now we're selling our stuff, like, you know, direct. That's the other thing too, is like farm direct to client. You know, all the middlemen are taking all the money. Can we get a farmer's market online that's global, that we can get our genetics wherever we need to go, and the marketplace is open to the world, whereas like we're advertising here locally on Kmud or whatever, it's like that's not broadcast to the world, like internet platform blockchain technology would be, and then no one can steal it from you because it's authenticated on the blockchain. So there's like your IP. So that's where we're going with all of this eventually.
But it starts with collecting your data, because if you can't collect your data, you can't own it and all that stuff, right?
I gotta write that shit down.
You know, but like, you know, I think in preserving the legacy, this is how, I don't even know how the universe brought us to this place in our lives to like help, you know, but we're like, this is what we need to do. So this is our soapbox. So thank you, like our passion soapbox.
I gotta tell you,
like, use technology to our
things. Yeah, I mean, you're saying exactly like you guys. I'm just glowing in it. I love it because this is exactly what I mean. This is what I geek out on because it's so transformative, right? And once you have a business that runs in that fashion, you know, you can plug people in and pull people out, right? And you can grow in that regard. You know, sometimes we get inhibited because we have a good person and they go to here and they can't go any farther. But you can't take them out because they own, and so you're stuck, and so your business is stuck in this realm of no growth. You know, it's kind of swirling around this person. There's a wonderful book that got me started on this years and years ago. It's called The E-Myth, and I tell people about that entrepreneurial myth. I tell people about that all the time. The thing about an entrepreneur, same thing about a business person, is they have a certain personality. They have certain aspects that they do fucking amazingly well, but they don't do other things really well. There's a lot of stuff they don't do well, and we glom on to somebody who does those things well, and then we get dependent on them, and that's when a business is in trouble. That's when you're just ripe for the slaughter, you know. And it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of things is, you know, you can't do everything. You have to, as a human being, you just have to play in your strengths. You know, do what you do well. Find the people that do the other things well, but
Let them
then
do it.
systemize it and process it so that you don't become dependent on other people. Because this is
Yeah.
we've all got our journeys, right? We're all going on a journey. You guys are going on a journey. I'm going on a journey. I'm trying to build a system around this thing so that I don't have to be here, or I can be here. I can replace somebody if I need to. We can grow. You know, we want to be able to adaptable and movable, but you get stuck and solidified in a situation if your knowledge gets locked in somebody else's head. I don't know how many times I've had a guy go, "Hey, you know, well, you don't pay me enough. I can tell you how to fix that, but you don't pay me enough." And I'm just thinking to myself, like, you're a moron. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I have this in a system. I don't need what's in your head. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah.
We don't need this. I'm not going to deal with that. I'm moving on
And
from
sometimes
that.
it's job security for the person too. If I wrote
Right.
it down, then
Yeah.
they need me.
No, I'm not valuable. I'm
But
replaceable.
if
Data
you
protection.
have that desire to grow and change, you always want to like go ahead and write it down. I'll just learn something new, and then I'll be really badass at a new thing, and then I'll send that along, and then I'll
Right.
go do a new thing. Like, you're always going to learn a new thing, unless you just want to do your one thing forever, and then you're concerned about your job security. But that's not who you want on the team. You want someone who's going to be
Right.
like helping you grow and build your
Right.
company.
You want
And
people. I think you're right. I think you should have people that want to grow, and I mean, you always have people that are, you know, are doers, and that's what they do, and that's great. But for me, I always want to give people the opportunity to be the best that they could be, because I don't know
Yeah.
what they can bring, right? And if I lock them
Yeah.
out through
You're
ignorance
missing out on
or
yourself.
bad practice, I'll never realize what this person's going to blossom into. And when they do, sometimes you get this gem, and you're like, oh my God, this person, you know, this is like this wonderful. And then they may go away, and you're like, I was really cool. I was there when, right? I enjoy that as much
Yeah.
as I have people that have worked for me that are going off and doing their own businesses, and they're like, oh, you inspired me to do this. I'm like, well, that's great. I'm happy for you. If you need anything, call me. I'll be happy to tell you what I went through. But that's such a better situation to see somebody grow out of something and grow up than to see them get stuck and
Yeah.
get passed by, right?
Yeah.
Eh.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I like that one better anyway myself.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that you guys were both hitting really on, you know, having that container business, right? Like that, the business is not. A mentor of ours always says, you want to own the business, you don't want the business to own
Correct.
you.
Right.
And like, you know, if you're functioning in that way, you need to get it outside of yourself. You need to build that solid container. You know, we use the idea of a container. It's a container. The walls, the structure of it are held by your operational infrastructure. Whatever your goals and missions and values are, that all
Brilliant.
builds that container. And you need to think about it as this is apart from me,
Yeah.
and this is my container, and this is how I'm going to build it, and these are the team people, and with that, you know, you're going to draw people into that container. You know
people
that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, but that's okay. It's not a problem.
Absolutely
Right?
true. Yeah, that's
Because
why. Yeah,
It's like this is our
now
container.
you have a
Do you want
fence
to come play?
or an outline around what it is that you can now work on. If
Right.
you don't have that defined, you can't evaluate it properly in a fair way, and you can't really allow it, you know, to do the hard things sometimes that you have to do, and you can't do some of the enjoyable things that you want to do because
Yes.
you're inside this hole instead
Exactly.
of being out.
sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes
I
that
love the
container
analogy.
needs
Perfect.
sometimes the container needs to change form. Maybe we need a new container. That's part of the evolution.
Right.
And I know that we
Market
haven't
changes. You can now.
Yeah. And kind of like what's
Exactly.
happened with our business, a lot of things have changed, and people see us as we're the soils ladies, which is great, and that's how we started. But our container has shifted a lot. I know we haven't really spoken much about soils or compost teas or regenerative farming or any of that, but you know, people usually see us and pigeonhole us into like we sell fertilizers and we test soil. It's like, yeah, that's part of a very big picture
This
of
container over
agriculture.
here.
And so that's a container that we built, but then we keep building new containers or expanding our container, changing the shape of our container. So as the industry has grown and become ready for new things, we're implementing new things. When we
That's
first started,
awesome.
people were throwing their soil away and not reusing it. So it was a big campaign to stop throwing your soil away and reuse it and re-amend with fertilizers. Well, now everyone does that. Great. Okay, well, I don't want to continue to just sit in that because we need to grow to the next step now, right? So we
Right.
implemented a new technology. That's great. What's next? What's next? What's next? And we always
That's
want to
awesome.
build and see what's next. You know?
Listen,
Speaking of industry born, I mean, that's like been the kind of pulse of our company is just
Sure.
like, what do you need? What do you need now? What do you
Yeah.
need now?
And bringing things to people that they don't know that they need, and then later they're like, "Wait, I do need that."
Yeah.
And we're like, "I know."
But because of your the way that you think and the structure that you put around yourself and the way that you're obviously if you're teaching other people, you're doing these things yourselves. Because of that, you now have something that is going to carry beyond this moment, right? You're going to be able to carry this. This can grow now, right? It can grow beyond you and have more. You know what I mean? It can become exponentially larger because the system allows for that. Because what you've
Yeah.
created allows for that movement instead of being kind of pigeonholed in that spot
Yeah.
where you're like, I can only work with 10 people. That's all my brain can handle, right? That goes away, and now you have this opportunity to take your vision and take that box and add, like you said, add more boxes and build that thing. You can build something, bigger if you want to. You don't have to, but you can because you created
Yeah,
a
your
structure
container
that allows
doesn't
for
have to
it.
be static. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be static. You're right.
Yeah.
And helping to develop the industry and making the history. We're making history. We're changing the
That's
face
right.
of cannabis agriculture.
You
And
could be
like,
changing the history of small community farming, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
you know what I mean? Because this energy has to go into cannabis doesn't mean that energy doesn't have to be applied to everybody who's in small ag,
Other
other
industries, yeah, it's
industries.
not
You know what I mean?
cannabis.
Like
This is
because
where we
we
started.
have, I think you guys nailed it with the ERP thing. You just can't force. You just can't force some people into those boxes. Those things are great for certain corporate structures, and those are usually really large, right? Because they have to. Once you get super
Not where
large,
we're at.
you just have to fit that model. But when you're wanting to be young or small or agile or change or whatever, it just doesn't work. And maybe you guys could be setting the pace for a lot of things. It doesn't have to be just this industry. So that's exciting to
Yeah.
me because
And that's why we need tools that fit that. There's like really, really small business tools and then really, really large business tools, and the people in the middle get lost. And that's how we felt. We were in the middle and we were getting lost. And so we had to develop our own way. And so
Yeah.
I know that other businesses are struggling with the same thing
Yes.
because
Right.
you're getting lost because you can't afford the giant
I wish I
system.
would have met you 5 years ago when I was lost.
We would have both been lost together.
Yeah, you're like, Anyway, listen, I mean, we're bouncing up on time, but I would love to have the conversation about the soil. So maybe we can get together and do this again and have that conversation because, I mean, that's equally as valuable of a conversation. But in my mind and in my heart, what we just talked about is the most scintillating or interesting and fun thing because of the value that it can bring to anybody. It can bring it to anybody, and it's just it's
Yeah,
a thought
any
process
business.
change,
Yeah.
right? Because it
Yep.
literally you can manage your own life with these principles, right?
Right. It
Yes.
doesn't even have to be a business, like you said, the lean, the guy with the lean. Like
The lean life.
You can
Yeah.
use this to run your household.
I,
if you
I encourage you to watch some of his videos on YouTube, and you're gonna be like, "Oh, this dude's fucking lost his mind." But then it doesn't matter genius. There's a certain amount of genius to it.
Right.
You're like, like my
That's true.
my wife would
Genius.
never let me put stickers on all the cabinets. I wish I had stickers on my cabinets. I'm telling you, like glasses. Oh yeah, that's where the glasses go. I don't have to think about that. Instead of looking
My
around.
mother does that. My mother does that. You
Yeah.
know, like if you have there's a pair of scissors that says kitchen on it. Those scissors go in the kitchen as opposed to the office scissors.
That's
Those
right.
will also have
Or the
well,
yard.
you know, oh yeah, she does that for real.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it. Awesome.
Yeah, it makes life easy sometimes. So
It does.
Well, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank
We'd
you.
love
Is
to
there
come
anything
back
else
and
you guys
talk
want
to
to?
you.
Anything else you want to share? I'm sorry, I kind of step up. What's going to happen here is the really cool. It's recording you, it's recording me, and they'll come together. Your video will be beautiful. The audio is going to be great, and we won't have any of the laggy stuff if you're getting into that, and everything comes together nice. When it comes out in print, it's great because it's all being done local.
Nice.
We'll get the information for you guys. We'll post up what you want to post up. We'll push it out on social and stuff like that. So you should get some exposure that way as well. But really, like, I'd do this again. And actually, I would love to have Jordan in here. She's my process manager. She's genius.
Well,
You know, she's
that'd be
wonderful.
great to talk with her too.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
she comes
so
from
many
she comes from
conversations.
Starbucks. Like I'm like